students, now what we're going to do is go over how to make a poster. And so I have a template behind me that I'll work through right now. And hopefully by watching this, it'll be more clear when you sit down to do this with your mentor. So to begin with, let's look at our template. So we have a title that you'll put up here along with your name and your mentor's name. And if you have other students that you're working with, you can put their names there as well. Just remember that for your individual poster, right, everyone needs to be able to present their own poster. Your name goes first, okay? So you, the student that's presenting, your name goes first. Even if that means you're working in a group and someone else has exactly the same poster, that's okay. On their poster, their name goes first. So because the presenting of the poster is pretty critical for everyone. It's something we want everyone to be able to do during this particular experience. The other thing that you'll put here is your department name that you're in your college, along with your mentor's department in college. That way all that information is here. And then once you're finished, right now the things that are in yellow, you can actually change back to white if you want to. The color scheme that we have up here is pretty basic. If you want to change the overall color scheme, that's perfectly fine. This is just a template that we have. It's a starting point to make it a little bit easier for you and your mentor to sit down and go through a poster. Okay? And in fact, if your mentor has a template that they would rather you use, you can use their template. It's okay, all right? But this is just a baseline for everyone to sort of start with. Next, what we have is the abstract, and that goes here. And in that particular abstract, it really is like most abstracts. It's just an overview of what the thing was that you're interested in doing, what your question was, what you did, what you found, what it means. And there are sentences there to help you look at, to answer each of those little questions, and it will help you sort of build your abstract. So the abstract goes here. The next part is the introduction or background section. And so depending upon the kind of project you're doing, it's going to be either a little more sort of introduction like just outlining some basic information that led up to what you're doing, or background information of here are some critical things that we wanted to sort of test between. Whatever the case might be, depending upon your particular field, just think about it as either an introduction or as a background. It's a place you would also put information on your study system and things like that. So you're setting the stage for what it is that you're going to be doing, right? That's really what you're doing. The next part is the question or the hypothesis, right? The question or the hypothesis. And here, what that really means is, let's say if you have something, we should all have a question that we're dealing with, right? That's the place that we start. You should all have a question. But you also might have a very specific hypothesis if you're doing sort of a more traditional kind of experiment, and that's great. If not, if just an overall question, a thing that you're exploring, a thing that you're interested in, however it is it looks in your particular area, working with your particular mentor, that's how you're going to frame it. So you don't need it. Right now it says question and then in parentheses and or hypothesis. Don't leave the heading that way, right? Just pick. In this case, pick. Is it a question? Is it a hypothesis? What is it that you're actually doing? Next is the methods part. And in the methods section, I'll actually slide over here. In the methods section, this is where you outline sort of exactly what you did and why. Hopefully, no matter what kind of project you're doing, you've been writing down and recording, these are the kinds of things I did. This is how I went about doing this particular experiment. This is how I went through certain kinds of literature. This is the way that I searched certain kinds of topics. Whatever the case might be, whatever you did, this is where you need to describe that particular part in the methods section. Sometimes, depending upon how long the introduction might be, this might be a little bit longer and there might not be room for the methods here. That's all right. The methods can just move to the top of this middle section up here. It's perfectly fine. All of this would then just slide down. Now, the next part that you're going to have is really the way that you're going to go about presenting your poster. And I'm going to make a separate video for how to present a poster. That way it'll be a little bit shorter to get through. But this is the part where it's really important to use as many pictures as possible in this particular part here. And so I have an example that's within the template of a student that did this a few years ago. And essentially it goes through exactly, here's the way that they labeled and set up their jars. Here's the way that they actually, the arenas that they use to test these little beetles and what they might do, what they fed them, the lab that they were in, what that looked like and how they would go about measuring them, sifting out larvae that they potentially did, and then actually recording data. So whatever your story is, right, whatever kind of project you're doing, you need to be able to tell your story with the pictures, right? It's the easiest way to do it. You don't want to have to worry about reading all the text and explaining that to people when they come by to ask you about your poster. You really want to say, this was the question I was interested in. This is what I did. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to get lost in the text. You just look at the pictures. Your main point, so the kind of poster that we're doing this year is a little bit different. It's kind of a hybrid between a traditional poster and a new format of poster that there's a little controversy as to whether or not people like it or don't like it. I'm also on the fence on it. It has some value in that in the middle of the poster, you're putting big images to get across the big points so you can tell your story, and then really big in text what the main point is. And that's what this section is here. What the main point or finding is of what you did. And that would go here. And then if there are figures or tables or analyses or pictures or something that sort of captures the experiment you did or the study you did or the kind of findings that you found, use this space here. Once again, pictures, okay? You want to use as many of those as possible so it's easier for you to think about and present. So you would run through, here's your main point, the audience can see that, here's what you found, and then you get to the conclusions part, and once again, that's just a few sentences on what it is you ultimately found and what it potentially means. Then there's a future direction section, and sometimes this is on posters, sometimes this isn't, it just kind of depends. We want the future direction section because this is really the chance for you to think about what you've done, because in most cases, you wouldn't have come up with the idea that you're testing on your own. You wouldn't have done a big literature search and said, oh, here's an interesting question that I want to explore. This is something that your mentor technically would have provided for you. And that's because we're all new to doing this, right? As students, you're new to doing this kind of research. And so we provide that info up front, but now what you're able to do is hopefully you go through the process and then at the end you go, oh, you know what? I would have liked to have tested this instead, or maybe this was a potentially more interesting question, or here's some things that we did wrong, or here's some things that we didn't control for. Whatever the case might be, you think about what you did and you come up with what you think the next steps might be, whether that's with the same experiment, changing something, doing a different experiment, coming up with entirely new questions, whatever the case might be, that's up to you, right? The future direction section really is up to you, okay? The future direction section. Then whatever references you use, usually we suggest that students find 3 to 5 references. Your mentors can obviously help you say, oh, here's some interesting papers to look at to help support what it is that you found. This is something that when we do sort of full-blown, more typical research kinds of projects, we do a lot of literature search. We may have hundreds or thousands of references depending upon the work that we're doing and the kind of study that we're doing. But here, just a few so you get a sense of what the literature might look like in your particular discipline that you're doing your research project in. And then finally, the acknowledgement section. Thanking everybody that sort of helped do this. Your mentor is one of the authors, but it's still okay to thank them. You may have postdocs or graduate students or other undergrads that helped. Whomever that might be, thank them for whatever you feel like you need to thank them for. But remember, it takes all of us to sort of make this work, not just 1 or 2 people. Okay? So hopefully running through the basic format with this template helps. If you have questions, you can ask me, you can ask your mentor, but hopefully this is a good starting point. So, good luck.